Last time we watched a modern PC emulating a NeXT, which was then in turn emulating a PC. So today we're flipping the stack once more, a NeXT machine emulating a Macintosh. It's obsolete technology no one uses today, but I'll bring it back to life. I'm the Vintage Collector and these are my stories. NeXT systems had amazing development tools, but lacked the massive software library of the Macintosh. A compatibility layer could, in theory, close the gap. Enter Executor. Executor was created by ARDI, which originally focused on a cleanroom reimplementation of Apple Macintosh APIs. In the early 1990s, ARDI produced versions of Executor for NeXTSTEP on both Motorola and Intel platforms, and later also for MS-DOS and Windows. After several years of development stagnation through the early 2000s, Executor was finally released as open source in 2008. As opposed to competing products, Executor didn't depend on Macintosh ROMs, but was close in implementation concepts to Wine or the contemporary Wabi for Solaris. Very much like Wabi and Wine translating Windows function calls to Unix system calls, Executor uses a similar approach by translating Macintosh Toolbox API calls into NeXTSTEP and later POSIX calls, while presenting an environment that was compatible with System 6 and System 7. Depending on the software category, compatibility reached around 60% of existing applications, and in some cases more when applications stayed within documented Toolbox API guidelines. Not everything could be emulated though. Applications using undocumented traps, depending on quirky system-level behaviors or accessing hardware directly, such as low-level graphics routines, custom serial drivers or AppleTalk, would typically fail. Extensions and control panels were also unsupported because Executor did not replicate the full Macintosh system software, and hardware-specific functionality were also outside its scope. One nuance often overlooked is performance. On NeXT's Motorola hardware, Executor ran 68K Mac code natively without CPU emulation. Still, it incurred some overhead from translating the UI and quick draw calls to display PostScript. To see Executor in action, I had to first acquire it. I didn't find any original disk images, but only this copy of Executor 2.0 on archive.org. Although it names itself Executor for UNIX with a file name referring to Executor for Linux, this one actually includes both the NeXTSTEP and the DOS version of it. And more than not, it looks like an old wares copy of some sorts, but as the software was open sourced anyway, who really cares? Except that extracting it posed some issues. The included shell script seemed to fail, as obviously expecting a file named executor-commercial.tar, which was absent. Manually extracting it helped to get the app, and since I had to also repackage the version of SoftPC 2.0 for NeXTSTEP, I did the same here, creating a proper package installer to facilitate the installation procedure. And with that, the installer runs through correctly, both on the actual NeXTStation but also inside the previous emulator. Note how Executor also offers an Intel platform build to run on NeXTSTEP x86. No surprise here, as Executor was also offered for DOS and even Linux at some point. I shall definitely have a look at this as well in a follow-up. Executor launches directly into the browser, resembling the classic system software desktop. But as mentioned before, there's no actual Mac system software included, even though there is a system folder containing some custom programs. Executor comes with some pre-bundled freeware and shareware programs, and I'm totally excited to see they included the Lemmings demo. Although it feels really sluggish inside the previous emulator. We should definitely give that one a show on the NeXTStation itself. Alright, so running Lemmings is definitely a bit quicker, but not exactly stunning. The graphics really puts it on stress, although the actual gameplay seems okay. I'd assume a turbo NeXTstation would fare a bit better. And how about sideloading new applications? Well, unless you use floppy disks, you can access the Unix file system from within Executor. So if you have your software laying around somewhere on the local disk or even on an NFS server, you can access it directly to install software. Or use Mac formatted floppy disks. They mount directly into Executor, so you can drive the install from there. As seen here at the example of StuffIt Expander, loading it up from floppy however seems to take significantly more time than on a real Macintosh and led to a sudden crash. And with that, I couldn't convince the NeXTstation to load up the floppy disk again, at least until I forcefully ejected it via the command line. Let's try again by copying the install file over and running it from Executor's virtual disk instead. Alright, seems like it's not related to floppy disk access, but rather StuffIt Expander 5.5 not being compatible to the system software emulated by Executor, baselining on System 6. Of course I knew that, but I was expecting an error message rather than an unconditional crash. But let's try StuffIt Expander 3.5. That one should work, as that's also the version coming bundled with Executor. And yes, it does, even running directly off the floppy disk. But not everything runs. This copy is not a well-behaved citizen. As mentioned earlier, the portfolio of compatible applications covered around 60%. Probably good enough, but there were better ways to do it. And this is where Daydream comes in. Daydream is not an emulator, but a fully licensed port of Apple's Macintosh ROMs to the NeXT hardware, running System 7 and native Mac applications at full speed. But that's a story for next time. Before we wrap up, I'd love to hear from you. Did you ever use Executor back in the day? On a NeXT or PC, or maybe even both? If you did, what worked? What broke? Share your stories in the comments below. I'm the Vintage Collector, and this was my story for today. Thanks for watching, and see you again next Sunday.